Hi, everybody. Is my mic working? Okay. I'm Lady Starlight. Thank you for joining me on the Tech Talk. So I'm very interested in your questions, first of all, before I go on the long tangents that you might not care about. But let me first start by just explaining my basic setup. And my basic setup is for mainly I don't DJ, I only perform live. So my studio is very similar to my live setup, so that everything is like integrated into one full thing, so that the work I do on my live set is also useful for recording and producing. So it's multitasking. And also, with when I moved not so long ago from the U.S., from New York to Berlin, and that was actually really helpful because I had a much bigger setup in the U.S., but it was like impossible to bring everything here on a plane, and the shipping is like crazy. So I really learned how to do a lot more with less equipment, and I've kind of just kept with that for my whole ethos of making techno, is that it doesn't have to, it's more about your creativity than it is about having a bunch of expensive equipment. And if you can, the more you can do with very little stuff, the more personally I'm impressed. So let me just go through what it is that I have here. It's going right now, so maybe I should stop that. So my main drum machine, if not for a long time the only drum machine, is the MFB Tanzbär. It has my very favorite kick drum in the world, so I can never get rid of it. But if you probably can't see it on camera, but it's pretty funny because there's like red electrical tape on the kick drum because I mute it and unmute it so much that it's fallen out. So it's quite funny. I find it amusing. Before it was the hi-hat button, but it looks a little sad. You can tell how much I love the kick drum. So, and then I have the Electron machine drum, which is, although it's called a machine drum, I use it half as a sampler and half as a drum machine. So it has a really great, this is the SPS 1 UW Plus, that the earlier ones didn't have sampling capability, but this is the one that has the sampling. And so for a while it was like the only kind of lead sounds I was using. Since then I've gotten a little better at this, so I've expanded my palette. So I have, and the interesting thing about this is that the way that it sounds is very rough sounding, because the only way you can do like with the Octatrack or something, you have like an SD card or some kind of USB capability, but this has none of that. So you either have to record it directly into the machine from an input, or transfer it via like a SysX transfer, which I am absolutely not a fan of at all. So I just do the quick and dirty way and record samples just directly into it. And actually, they sound 1,000 times better, so you can control them as well. So the sampling is actually, when you do it that way, is super easy. But if you ever wanted, I still haven't figured out how to do it from Ableton or anything, because it's just me. I'm like, oh god, I don't like to mix the two together. So I like to use Ableton as a multi-track recorder, and then do all the writing of everything on the equipment, because the two, to me, just, it's too much for my brain. And so I can basically, the cool thing is, with sampling, you can do anything you want. So you have this can function, this can have any sound that I want it to. Also use it as a master sequencer for the master clock. Actually, I take that back. I don't use it as a master sequencer. I just use it as the rock solid Electron clock. And then I have my eurorack, which of course there is a lot going on here. My sequencer is the MFB SEQ03, which unfortunately is discontinued. Quite sad. It's the best sequencer ever. I actually would be nice to have a second one, but I don't know. I'm sure I could find it somewhere. the great thing about this sequencer is that each channel you can sequence either gate, CV, an LFO, or an attack and decay envelope. So it has so much capability. Maybe perhaps not the easiest to get a hold of, get your head around. But if you know the Tanzbär, which I had before, this is my very first analog drum machine, and it was just absolutely the best choice. If you're familiar with this, it makes it quite a bit easier to get your head around this one. There's no display, so but that's why, you know, you always, with modular and with gear in general, you kind of pay the price. The less space you have, the more you have to menu dive and you know, do little things. But it's worth it because it's super small. So to me, it's worth it. I have no problem spending too much time sequencing things. So and then I have two. My approach has been, especially recently, really getting interested in sampling. So most of my stuff at the moment is sample based, and you know, it's such a different skill than synthesis. And for me, it's so there's so many options, and that it's very exciting, and it'll never get, you know, you never get tired of it. So, you know, training your ear to hear samples, working, you know, and how to harvest things. It's like, to me, it's just so much fun. And the more you do it, you know, the better you get at it. So I have two samplers I actually have three sampling voices in my eurorack. I have two tip-top ones, which are also really, really, really small. But again, not so easy to use because there's no display. So you literally, you make a little sample playlist, and you have to memorize the clicks of where you want to go. So it's not, it leads to many potential disasters in a live set, but that's okay. I love it. I love potential disasters. So for these two, what I do, there's several different modes, but I have them on a looping, a constant looping. So I can have atmospheric sounds, which are, in terms of a live set, really important to have, you know, things kind of modulating and changing on their own, because again, you only have two hands, and to keep the movement going, you really need something sort of to back you up a little bit. This is where somebody else might use a computer or the Octatrack or something like this to help, a little bit of support, so you're not just out in the wilderness of hi-hat, nothing's happening for 10 minutes, and you're like, where is this? So that's a nice safety net. And I have my 909 hi-hats, which are obviously completely essential. And this is my main oscillator. My only oscillator in this is the Verbos Electronics complex oscillator, which is two oscillators. And I mean, this is was the first oscillator that I ever bought. It was quite expensive for the first one, but I just knew it was going to be totally worth it. So I've been able to not buy one for years. So maybe the price tag looks a bit high, but it's not. So just so many capabilities, such a powerful sound, sometimes too powerful, where you're like, whoa, okay, wow, that's a lot compared to everything else. So that's quite a compliment. This is a beast. It's a beast. So then I have, you know, my the Optimix, so that's where everything, that's what I have the oscillator going into here, and then I have a UVCF filter, which is also exclusively for the complex oscillator. And let's see, now going down to my other sequencer, which is also Verbos Electronics, voltage multi-stage, which is, I have maybe cracked into another really great investment, because I've cracked into maybe 40% of what it can do. And it's every time, it's like I have find so many different uses for it. So it's just been, you know, like so many different modules in one, and you can just change things. It's just great for variation. The only thing that might make people a bit nervous is that you can't save anything on it. So you have to do all the sequencing live, which is totally obviously cool in the studio, but maybe a bit nerve-wracking live, but again, I don't care. And then I also have another verbose. I'm a big verbose electronics fan. A multi-envelope. So I have then 2 envelope generators, the Quadra and the multi-envelope, which I got to the Quadra. And then I have my latest, my newest purchase was the Erica Synth sample drum, which actually works, again, very similar to, it says drum, but it's actually not used for any drums, sadly, at all, in fact. So what a great module this is. I really could not recommend it more. It is so easy. It has a great little tiny but LED display. You can reverse it. I mean, there's just, wow. You can control, you can, you know, choose what CVs will do what, and yeah, I mean, absolutely so happy with this thing. It really transformed my live set and my studio productions. So that's what's happening here in general, and please do ask questions, because I'm probably not covering half of the things that people might want to know. And then I have my effects, and I'm only using, I don't have any effects in the eurorack, because I like pedals. They're light. You can throw them around, and they don't when you're traveling, and so I like to keep the effects out of the rack, because I'd rather use it for other things. So for the studio, I normally don't bring so anyway, I have the Blue Sky, the Strymon Blue Sky, which for most people out there probably know what a wonderful, amazing reverb that is. Then I have the Strymon Deco, which is a tape saturator and double tracker. And then I have the Eventide H9, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with as well. Great powerhouse. There's nothing that it can't do. When I'm doing a live set, I don't bring the Deco, just because, you know, saturation for a live set, it's not that noticeable in a club. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't need another whole. Yeah, the less the better. Less is more. So, but I wanted to bring it for this chat because we're talking about how I would write a track. So now that I've explained what's happening here, I will just go through a very basic workflow that I have. So my favorite kick drum, let's hear that. Let me make sure, probably there's a bunch of things not turned down. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna press play now. So there's my kick drum. And I always just start with a kick drum, like a metronome, basically. But usually I kind of use it more like a metronome and kind of keep the decay down because I need to tune it later. So now, what would I do now? At the moment, I think for this talk, I'm not really gonna, this is a machine drum. And you can hear that's going through the Blue Sky. And actually, it's worth saying, let me turn this down. But it's worth showing the saturator, especially if you're working with maybe like a bit more gritty, maybe not so good quality samples. If you hear this is like an essential thing. So here it is with nothing. Well, let me take the reverb off. It's also cheating a bit. And then here's this with the saturator. This is the best. I highly suggest this pedal if you don't have it. Dull. Exciting. So showcasing the deco is best to do with the machine drum, but we're not going to do that now. So now the way I use most of my productions are done in, like, I basically use Ableton fully as just a multi-track recorder. So everything I'm writing is going to be recorded the way that it is coming out of here. But the one thing I do in advance and use software for is the pad sounds that I have. So I actually, if you can believe it or not, I only have one polyphonic synthesizer, which is, I know it's crazy, but that's the way it is. So I have the ability to, so I like to integrate, that's the one part where I like to integrate Ableton into my other sounds. So I can do really great pads and record them, you know, with everything sort of coming in and out. And here's one. So this will be the most I will do in advance for making music in a computer would be this. It would also be smart if I like listened to a track and made a pad, but I don't do that. I just make the pad and then I figure it out. So this is coming out of one of my TikTok one samplers on a loop. And then my second one, which I've taken, which I've put a high pass filter on so it doesn't interfere with the low frequencies of the main pad. Maybe that's me. Yeah. All right. I have to start the sequence for that to work. This is the second pad. So that I can have two pads shifting on their own. And I pitch them, it doesn't, it only pitches things up and down. It doesn't like, there's no like, what do you call that? It's time stretching capability. So it'll be faster if it's, you know, if you pitch it up. So then if you have it on two different pitches, you have the sequence, you know, swelling at different times. So, and you don't kind of know what's going to happen, so it's always cool. It's always best for me just to integrate a lot of things that kind of go out of my control, because I'm not the kind of producer that has an idea and executes that idea. I like to experiment with sounds and then build a track from the experimentations, as opposed to having this idea in my head that I then recreate. Chance is one of the best things that you can integrate in your productions, in my opinion. And one of the biggest advantages to working with hardware as opposed to software, because it's really hard to get an element of chance. It's hard to do something that you wouldn't do otherwise, of like, oh wow, that's a mistake, you know, that goes wrong, that you're like, that sounds amazing. So I love those. So now here's this is the one, this is the way I normally use the one in these, you know, weaving in and out pads for atmosphere. And then the sample drum, I have two sequencers. You know, the key, I think for me, I have to have, for a live set, it's absolutely essential that you have at least 2 different sequencers so that when you change a pattern on one, it doesn't just like everything change. So so I have the sample drum, the 2 voices. I think I did not mention that there's 2, the sample drum is actually 2 samplers in one, with each individual output and CV programming. So one of them comes from the MFB SEQ03, and then the second one comes from the voltage multi-stage. And this is where fun stuff happens, where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And then you're like, that sounds amazing. Also, one of the great things is that when you are learning a piece of gear, before you know how to use it, you often have these like amazing things because you're using it wrong. Epic. Those are like my favorite things that happen, where you're like, I don't know how to use this, but that sounds amazing. So this is coming from the voltage multi-stage. I never know how much I should go into the actual piece of equipment, or how many people even have this, but it's basically, let me just stop that for a moment. It's an 8-step sequencer, but you have the ability to change the length of the sequence based on this, it's called the strobe effects, where you have these inputs up here, and wherever you put the input is like the last step. So I love like bizarre, like 7-step sequences. Live for these things. So you can, if you put the strobe, then you can just turn this knob and it'll shorten the sequence or lengthen the sequence, and then you can restart it while it's playing, so you can get all this amazing stuff weaving in and out. There's the 8-step. Can you hear that? Is that loud enough? Okay. And now I can change the right now that's 6, right? So especially when you're playing live, especially, this is amazing to just switch things up quickly with like one turn of a knob, which is essential. And there's sliders on it that then that affects the pitch. Well, I have it patched to. No, sorry, that's not the right one. Now the main step of the sequence in this one, so the gate's coming from the SEQ03, but the pitch is coming from the multi-stage. This one is the second voice of the sample drum. This is fully generated gate and CV pitch from the multi-stage, so when I'm switching a pattern, which a lot of my bass frequencies, which I'll get to, are coming from this. So I need to be able to switch the sequence and not have everything change. It's not a good thing. Like, oh wow. And also the looping pads will also allow me to change patterns on one sequencer without the whole thing, without disrupting everything. These are all just little sliders, so if you have a setup, the key to writing things, by you have to have a setup that allows you to write things that builds in a lot of uncontrollable variables. I understand that a lot of people don't want that, but you should do it. It's fun. Turn up the monitor here. Never go wrong with the ride cymbal. So now I'm going to change the sequence length on that. Let's put some delay on that. So the power, the power of just playing around is so essential to me for techno, and just seeing what happens. Like, I can't imagine taking that away from my production techniques of, never knowing, okay, what am I going to do? I'm just going to play and just listen. This is why, for me, it was, I tried to make techno originally with software, because, let's get rid of that ride cymbal, it's not necessary. I tried, when you're starting out, you don't, who has like 3,000 euros to spend on like a reason? I mean, and that's like really cheap to set up something, that's a full, hardware setup to produce tracks with. So obviously nobody starts there unless you're rich, but I don't know. I don't know many rich people myself. So, you got to work with what you have. The most important thing is that you don't let, even though this is a talk about gear, I must say also that you should never let your limitations of what you have stop you from making music. So there's a question from the audience. Is this too loud?
There's a question from Ryan asking, what was your first piece of modular equipment, and was it intimidating?
Yes, very intimidating. But we were talking earlier, if you have like the cool thing about the modular community is that most people are very very open. I found to be very welcoming and want to teach, especially Schneidersladen here in Berlin. But if you're not in Berlin, I find that most local or somewhat local shops will be very welcoming and not make you feel like stupid or like you don't know anything. There's a really great, interestingly enough, unfortunately enough, maybe, is that the most expensive thing that you'll get is the case. So that's like a huge problem in terms of, it might be the barrier, I think, for most people, that you're like, okay, I'm spending like 700 euros on something that makes no sound at all. So it's really hard because with eurorack, you have to spend money on things that don't make a sound. But you have to remember that all the utility things end up being more important than the voices, to be honest, because you can switch those in and out, and you can use the essence of modular is in the utilities. What I started with, I was very fortunate enough to have a friend who lent me a case. So, but now this was before, now there's like some really great cases out there that are properly made for someone who's just getting into it, that maybe only hold like 3 to 4 modules. And there's also things, blank plates, is that what they're called? Yeah, blank plates, which I highly suggest, so that you don't have to fill up your whole rack. Then you have, things filling up, and then so you don't have to do this, fill it up really quick. There's a lot of pressure if you have just empty spaces to fill up. So if you get these blank plates, then it doesn't feel like you have to fill up so much. So ultimately, the things you need are an oscillator, a sequencer, in fact, I don't know that you even properly, depending on what kind of music you make, you really don't actually need a sequencer. It's possible you might not need one, but most people will need a sequencer. An oscillator, a envelope generator, and what else do you need? What else? Sorry, I'm totally just like, what? I'm trying to remember what it is exactly that I started with. So yeah, envelope generator, an oscillator, and VCA. Yes, I was like, wait, what is a VCA? Okay, thank you. So you can get away with 1, 2, 4 modules is the best way to start. That's all you need to really start, and you can actually do really quite a bit with 4 modules. I would suggest. I think maybe you could probably get away with some other not having. I'll think about that. But those were the first things. Those were the first 4 modules that I got, and there are plenty of cases that will allow you to just get those 4 modules, and you do not have to spend a lot of money. Like, there's a lot of really great, especially now, a lot of really great smaller companies that make amazing things. That now that I feel like the case barrier to entry has finally sort of been addressed, that it really ends up, it makes the barrier to entry a little bit easier. So that's what I would suggest now that there's less expensive cases. The case is always like, oh God. And then also to keep in mind, once you start getting your eurorack down, ultimately you spend less money for basically, I can have a sampling module where if I have to, buy a standalone sampler, I can buy a sampling module, for significantly cheaper than I'd have to buy a whole other machine for that. So once you get into it, you get your case, you get your workflow down, the individual modules relatively are not as expensive as buying a whole new piece of equipment. So to me, it's actually worth the investment in the long run that I end up spending less money on getting new modules than I would on buying a new drum machine. So hopefully this answers your question.
There's actually a good follow-up question from Peter. He's asking, how long did it take you to find the kind of setup that seems to fit your needs perfectly in terms of what you would like to achieve? Mm-hmm. And was there much of like buying and selling stuff before you discovered what you really want?
Yes. Not too much, but not too much buying and selling, actually, believe it or not. I don't sell very many things because I think if I bought it in the first place, maybe I will use it again in the future. But I'm trying to think of the thing. It really, that's the unfortunate thing about hardware, is that you will always find out more about what works for you by buying the wrong thing. This is an unfortunate fact of life. So I would say that it took maybe there's also, for me, since my live performances are so important to me, and the main focus of I spend a lot of time just basically write new tracks to perform live, and then I record them. So literally everything is sort of integrated into this one activity of what I do. So I would say, various it changes because you change over time, but to get to a point where my eurorack, I feel like actually only now maybe is my eurorack at a point where it can function almost entirely on its own for a techno set, besides drums. So this has taken many years, but you will, along the way, you can make things work. It's always in stages where you're like, okay, this is working for me, and then you're like, but now I need this, so let me explore that. I suggest for sure not buying any new equipment until you feel the absence of it in your setup. This is a huge thing. Don't buy things like, oh, well, that's cool, or that's, only buy things when you're like, you know what, I need something to do X, Y, or Z. And that's when you buy X, Y, or Z, and never before that, because that's how you have the most streamlined setup, and you have a setup that you only have stuff that you need. So by making sure not to do frivolous buying of something, I'm sure a lot of people have been to Super Booth and you're like, I need this, I need that. You get crazy and it's like, overwhelmed with exciting things, and they're all amazing, but always make sure just to start really small, and you build up, and you only get things when you know what it is that you need them for. And that actually took quite a long time, because getting your brain around eurorack is, it's not that easy, but it's also not that hard. So there's a really great, I'm totally blanking now on the name of, there was a series, I think it's the channel is Tuesday Night Machines, I think it is. Absolutely best tutorials about the very building blocks of how a modular synth works. Without that, I would have been nowhere. It's the most perfect explanation, because in the beginning you don't even know what a gate is, or that's not something you're born with knowing, and then understanding how everything works. So I really suggest that series. I can't remember exactly what the series is, but I'm sure you could find it if you search it. But that was absolutely essential, and you don't have to ask embarrassing questions to people that you feel like, oh, I should probably know this, but I have no idea what you're talking about. So in the privacy of your own home, you can learn. So that was super helpful. But it's never finished also. So it's taken me all this time to figure out my setup, and then it will take me all the rest of my life to still figure it out. But yeah, so it's always in stages. You think you have it figured out until you're, oh, this could make this better. But never rush yourself. There's no substitute for time of just trying things and trying not to buy too many things that won't work for you. But there's always eBay Kleinanzeigen if you live in Germany anyway. There's always eBay. Reverb.com I think is what people use in the US, so that's always nice.
There's a question from Wesley. He was asking, when you play live, do you set up the changes in headphones, or is everything played on the speakers that you're doing?
Oh, everything's played on the speakers. You might hear that if you hear me playing a live set sometimes. Yeah, I can't, when I'm working on a 16-channel mixer, you can't cue up the individual, you can't actually do that. So that's something that is never really a choice of mine. It was like, well, I can't cue up the channel, so it's not even possible. Now I'm actually starting to work on a DJ mixer, because my ultimate goal is to, again, have absolutely nothing with me and play a really great live set. This is my ultimate goal. How can I make less? So now I actually thinking, this is a bit of a tangent, bear with me. I want to have just this case and one of the little, the 909, the little Roland TR09, I think that's what it's called. The little tiny one. I think I'm going to be able to get away with just using that, which will make me beyond happy. Because the less you have, the more relaxed it is, and the more you got it. You know what I mean? And you're feeling confident, and you're not and then if this, the setup, sometimes things are over here and over there. So I never cue things, mostly because I don't have the ability to. But now that I'm using a DJ mixer, now I guess I would have the ability to cue things up, but yeah, I kind of feel like I approach it like very much like a live musician. So I'm like, no guitarist is not like in their headphones like figuring out that sounds right. They're just like, pfft. So I think part of the firstly it was just the lack of technical ability, and then I realized, actually this is kind of what a live performance is about, that you have like, you're kind of having a give and take with the audience, and they're kind of feeling like, oh wow, what's going to happen now? And you don't know either. So you and the crowd are like, what's going to happen? Okay, yeah. So I feel like I like sort of the honesty of it as I see it, where, and if it sounds bad, then you just fix it. That's where you have to learn your equipment enough to be like, okay, or pretend, or develop performance skills where you're like, oh, yeah, it's amazing, and you're like, fuck, this sucks. That's my technique. But if you know your equipment and you know what it's going to do, you often don't have to cue it up. You basically know what it's going to do. So my new sequencing with this multi-stage sequencer, which is unable to be programmed, that was a bit of scary thing for me to really integrate this. So now I'm feeling comfortable enough with my setup to have a basic idea of what it's going to do, but it's a bit nerve-wracking. I won't lie. For people, especially just starting out doing a live set, you kind of really, you don't be afraid to build in a safety net for yourself. There's no shame in a safety net, especially when you're starting out, and then you can experiment more when you're a bit more comfortable. So, no cueing. Maybe in the future, maybe not. With the DJ mixer, maybe, but it takes away from the performance also for me. So. Did it fall off? It fell off? Where is it? Oh, here it is. Was that exciting break? It was drama, wasn't it? That was intentional. It was for dramatic effect to make you, what's going to happen now? So, I think that maybe I should play some music, right? Woo! All right, so let's go. Let me bring this. I showed you just a bit of the voices by themselves, but let's bring it together. So now I don't know what's going to happen. Good, that's good. So this is my one sampler, one of them, with the loop going. Second one, I'm bringing in. here's my complex oscillator, the bass line. See, again, very loud, no? Like, whoa! That happens a lot. Yeah. See, oop. So, and if you bring up something and it sounds bad, just bring it up, and then just bring it back in so that it sounds intentional. And this, if you hear on this bass sounds, I'm going to put, what is this? This is the H9, the diatonic algorithm. It's like a harmonizer. And then you can see it's basically, it's so sick. It almost adds, it's like a delay, pitch delay, so it almost adds a totally new sequence. Always build things into your live setup that are easy to transform with one knob. Where's the kick drum gonna come in? You don't know, right? Ooh! How's it gonna work? Now let's put some of that H9 on this one. Reverb. Too much reverb. now I just switched one of these loops to a different one and brought in the other one out. And now I just switched the main pad. Always have fun, no matter what. If you fuck up, who cares? I do it all the time. Messing around with this sequencer, seeing what happens. Don't be afraid. See what I've done. Okay. To be doing something all the time. Just if it's sounding good, just lay back. transitions and everything moving, you see how the simpler your setup is, the better. You can have the most amazing sounds, but if you're overwhelmed, people are feeling that vibe from you, and it doesn't work. That's another H9.
Yeah, I can see you were like really in the zone there. Super nice.
I know, I'm like, oh,
There's actually
oh, hi everybody. Oh.
a lot of questions popped up while you were playing. So
Okay, that's a good sign.
if you're ready,
I am
let's
ready.
get to a few of them. So earlier on, Ellen was asking, do you have rehearsal sections prior to live show? Or do you make everything up as you go, ignoring like samples and patches you've pre-prepared?
I have a general idea of what's going to happen. I have things in order, so I do not improv live. I do some things. I try to control as much as I can, but I'm also just aware of the fact that if I try to make everything perfect the way I rehearsed it, that's never going to happen. So stop trying to do that. I'm open to the things going wrong, but I definitely have a set plan. But I'm not afraid or upset if it doesn't go according to plan. But yeah, no, I absolutely, I admire people so much, like Surgeon, like Mark Verbos, who does live sets, and Mark patches the thing, you know, right there before the set. I'm like, wow, and does amazing things. So, but I am not perhaps that confident. So I like to have a shell of a plan, something I try to do, but again, make sure that if it goes wrong, I have a lot of safety nets of what to do. But I do plan things, but not too far, because I acknowledge that you cannot control everything. So you have to leave yourself a little bit of room so that you don't like freak out and get totally, like, I've been there, don't get me wrong. I tried when I first started to control everything and have everything go as planned. I was like, okay, this is not working. And then if something goes wrong and you're like visibly nervous, and that's a very underestimated part of a live set, is what you're radiating and how you feel while you're doing it. And that's a huge part of a success of a live set, that as long that it goes hand in hand, it's almost just as important as what it sounds like. So that's I think a common difficult thing for people to get their head around, that the performance, you're not producing a track, you are performing. So whenever you give that energy, trust me, the compression, we were discussing this earlier, the compression of the kick drum doesn't matter, maybe something's off, but people are just like, yeah, this person's having so much fun. Yeah, you know what I mean? So that's a huge part of your job as a live performer that I like to accentuate. It really does. It makes a huge difference. So cool. Some things are unintentionally improv, that's for sure.
Wesley was asking, do you do any live repatching, or does the patch on the modular stay the same for the live set?
It stays the same. I accidentally, again, have to repatch when something's not working. Oh wow, okay. In some scenarios, at some point again, my live setup is always changing. The way, not always some things stay the same, but a lot of things change over time. So there was a time when I was repatching a few things during the set, but very minimal things that were just like, oh, now I want this to sequence that, nothing like changing the total flow. So, but yeah, live repatching. Yeah. For club, it's great if you're doing like in some other environment, but when you're doing like a techno club, it's gotta be hit it, because it's a distinct challenge of a live techno set, is that what people are hearing before and after you are DJs. So everything, is lined up with, 16 bars, everything's already arranged in DJ friendly ways. So people are very accustomed to hearing the changes happen when they happen. So you really have to be fast. So, but if you're doing more experimental set or more ambient, you know what I mean, then I think the live repatching totally works and would be fun. So
cool. Another question more towards the studio side of your production. Do you have any tips on how to get creative again when you don't have any sparking ideas at the moment? Is there any tools you go to? Is there any machines that you use when you think, all right, I don't know where to go with this now, and what can I do?
Yeah, actually, I have this really great technique. I haven't used it in a while, but again, that really depends on what kind of gear you have. So for some people, for me, it's very easy to just patch something weird and see what happens, but that's not, everybody doesn't have that, ability or luxury to have a lot of equipment. So, but what you can do, there's this app called like a random number generator. And at one point I would I would assign these different numbers to either pieces of gear. Well, one time there's a few ways I did it, but it's basically generating random numbers between for pieces of gear that I would assign. And then when you want to do a sequence, now I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I would basically make the parameters between 1 and 0, so that 1 would mean note on and 0 would mean note off. And if you get this like a variety of numbers from 1 to 16, and you can choose how many random numbers you want out of 1 to 16, like say you want 4 or 5 numbers. Now I actually haven't done it in a while, but it's a really great thing, so that then you can generate a random sequence. So if you don't have some randomizing feature on your equipment, even just assigning the equipment, you're like, okay, I hadn't used that equipment. I'm going to use that equipment, and I'm going to generate a random sequence. And then that was super helpful. I was totally into that method. So it's like a random sequence generator is the name of the app. And it's a very particularly good one because it has all the things that you can control so that you don't get like, so you can control the number of steps. I'm sure that people could figure it out how to do that. But absolutely great. Just adding some kind of thing outside of your own brain that you can't control. And again, for some people, depending on your equipment, that's quite easy. But this random numbers I found to be helpful. So that was a good technique.
Cool. Yeah, nice tip. And is there anything in your studio that you use a lot that you didn't bring today?
Yes. Well, I always actually put the kick drum through this bass compressor pedal, which I did not bring. And then I also have I can't remember now the manufacturer, but it's just a very popular guitar effects bass compressor. What else? I also have the mono machine that I use for sequencing. It does like a really amazing arpeggio. The way you can program the arpeggio in that machine is crazy. It's just insane. It's like, so I love an arpeggio. So I use that a lot for sequencing. I use the Novation bass station a lot. I use the mono machine and the bass station together very frequently. This I've been using a lot more lately with the lockdown. If you're constantly preparing for a live set, what happens is that, and actually towards the end of last year, I was getting very, very frustrated. Oh yeah, sorry. Very, very frustrated with my setup. You do have to change it frequently. In fact, the machine drum is feeling very like I've squeezed everything out of it that I can. And then I got this sample drum module, which basically kind of functions in this eurorack formula as the new machine drum. So, but shh, don't tell him. He's listening right now. I mean, I love them both equally. So I'm actually looking to phase the machine drum out at the moment. So using the bass station. What else? I also use the Strymon Dig pedal and the Strymon Mobius pedal as my effects. And my computer, to record everything is also not here. And the Yomox kick drum. What else? But this is all the main pieces that I can carry with me. So keep it simple.
Wesley was asking early on in the stream, the deco saturation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use it on the master stereo out or just on a certain channel or as a send?
When I'm recording? When I'm playing live, I don't. I do it individual channels at different levels. I don't actually use it on the kick drum for live because it's unpredictable and you don't know. You need really good monitoring to figure out where it's hitting in there, and it's never at the same setting that you would want it for everything else. So I use it primarily on the lead sounds and tiny bit on the percussion, but the kick drum I have to leave on its own.
Cool. And Harris was asking or saying he saw you back in 2017 and he remembers you were saying you don't use reverb. And he
we were just talking about
why.
this earlier. And sorry, I missed the last part of the question.
He's wondering why. Why you
Oh,
don't
well,
use
yeah, we literally just discussed this between the two of us before that. Actually, I've changed my reverb ways, but I have to be honest, there was a time maybe around like the mid-2010s where all techno was so oversaturated with reverb. For me, it just was like too much, and I was like, I also like older techno, which does not frequently use a lot of reverb. So, and it's not, I just like a more direct sound. It's more of what I hear. And I feel like sometimes the reverb distracts from, distracts from the sound. So a lot of it was a reaction, an anti-reverb reaction. But now I've come to terms with my reverb. I had like reverbitis. And so now I've come to terms. Me and reverb have reconciled, and we're back together. So yeah, but since 2017, my setup has definitely changed. I was very into like a super minimal direct sound, so getting a little bit more spacey now. So we reconciled. We're back together.
There's a question on your mix down process. Do you do the whole mix down yourself, or do you get it mixed before it's getting mastered?
I absolutely do it myself. So I really think that that's a really, I understand why people do that, but to me that is not what it means to be a producer. Sorry, I know that sounds a bit like, but if I can't, I mean, it's one thing to have a mix down when you're a really seasoned producer and maybe you're working a lot, but you know you got it, you know what I mean? But maybe you just don't have time or something like this. But if you're starting out and you don't learn, you got to learn how to do your mix downs. It's part of techno to me. That you know what, if it sounds a little crappy, then you get better at it. You know, you've got to do it you've got to learn how to do that. And if I could do my mastering, I would try to. It's like I can't imagine not wanting to master all parts of the chain of production. Again, with no disrespect to anybody who does have somebody do their mix downs, because they probably for sure sound better than mine, but it's really important to me that I learn how to do everything by myself. So this is very important to me. But yeah, maybe, you know, I don't know if, yeah. Again, no disrespect to anybody who wants to choose that route. That's important for me to lay out, but for me it is not, especially, you know, women also are under a big old microscope about what we do, and, you know, for credibility, it's like, if I didn't do my own mix downs, they'd be like, oh, she doesn't do anything. So yeah, gotta be done. Gotta do my own mix down.
And do you think can you see a progression in your productions, looking back on your first release versus now, on how you've improved in Mixdown?
Oh.
Or is there like a tip you can share, something that you would have wanted to know when you first started?
Well, I think it just comes down to like, see, for me, my workflow is, it has to be done on the mixer. There's very little I can do in post-production. I'm recording 3 tracks. 1 percussion, 1 all of the lead sounds, and the kick drum. This is the way I do it, because I do not like to edit, and I do not like to do anything after it's done. So my mix downs have to be done the old-fashioned way on a mixer before I record it. And then luckily I can go in Ableton and then fine-tune things, for sure. But so for me, like having somebody also mix down my tracks would be like ridiculous. She'd be like, here's the turning down the, you know, it'd be like ridiculous for me. They couldn't do very much, could they? So yeah, it just comes down to, you know, training your ear. The more you do it, the better you are. The more you, you know, and then the more you expand your palette, then the more you work how to integrate certain other sounds into everything else. And you will definitely be doing it poorly at first. That's to be expected. But don't be afraid. You know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, don't let your skill level stop you from doing something. You will never figure it out. You will never be perfect. Just do it. Like, not to quote Nike, but it's important that you don't be afraid to make mistakes and not be great. You know, no one's great at first. So you just do it, and with what you have, and then you keep working at it, and then you get better. So I think everyone really honestly has to. There's certain tools that are really helpful. Yeah, just learning how to EQ is something that you just, you know, you just have to do it, and you have to learn by doing it wrong and all that kind of thing. So I guess when I very first started out, it was finding, where all the muddy frequencies are, and then getting rid of them. So my brother is a producer of bands, you know what I mean? So he works with recording, miking live instruments, and he very much, drilled into me about never boosting anything at all. Sometimes with techno that you do have to boost things, but very much not trying to boost anything. So that was something that I was very helpful. But then I found in techno you kind of do with analog, with instruments, dynamic instruments, maybe not, but it's interesting to have that also perspective of what that's like, because that's a totally different world. But you can learn from everywhere. So
Another question on YouTube from Bored Elephant. He's
Great
asking he's asking about the Tanzbär.
yeah.
What's your preferred use of it and features? Do you use it more for live or more in the studio, or both? And what features of it do you like the most?
I use it for both. Now I'm afraid. I love it so much that I don't want to take it on the road with me anymore, because it's discontinued. And if I break certain things on it, it can never be fixed. So it's too precious to me now. I'm going to bring it off the road. It's so light. The kick drum's so great. So I like that you can sequence. I think, I can't remember what the modes are, because it's, I've used it so frequently that I'm just, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Excuse me. But I like that in a certain mode, there's like 3 modes to it, that you can program, and I don't know any other machine actually, that each instrument can be have its own individual step length. So you can have like all kinds of polyrhythmic things going on and still have like a 4/4 kick drum. So you could have a 15 step hi-hats. It's like absolutely great. I don't know, actually, I'm sure there's other machines that do that, but that's maybe my favorite feature. Trying to think. I guess that's the main thing that to me is a standout feature. And it also has CV inputs or outputs that you can change. So, and actually, I actually forgot, I haven't used this in so long, but it has like 2 synth voices. I totally forgot about those. One's like a bass, or no, sorry, there's only one synth voice, one like a bass synth, and then there's like a CV sequencing channel. I forgot about that. I'll get back into that at some point. At one point I was trying to get into that, but yeah, I mean, the amount of features, I couldn't even, there's so many great ones. It just has such a clear sound and so straightforward, and once you get down with the sequencing, the MFB sequencer thing, it's good. But it's maybe, I forgot, it's not really that easy to begin with, but you can do it. Everybody can learn anything.
Another question related to recording in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
How many takes does it usually take on average to be satisfied with the result? Or do you do 1 take and that's it?
Well, I'd say I have frequently recorded things many times, but ultimately what you have to realize, if after 5 times it's not on point, it's not probably a good track. It's just the way it is, and you have to like move on. So I've never had a track that I've recorded like more than 5 times that ever really was a great track. So I've learned, you know what, try it. If it's not working, just keep going, because when you have that great track that is like 1 take, 2 takes maximum, it's magic. You know what I mean? And those are the tracks that you put out, and you just gotta, in order to have enough of those, you just have to write all the time, and then you have those, and you know a good track when it's there. Sometimes you maybe have to just record, something where you didn't make the, where you just maybe want to change a bit of how you alter the sequence, or the attack or decay at certain times, but ultimately you shouldn't have to change a lot, or just move on. That's my advice.
Cool. Are there any modules for your modular that you would like to have but at this time don't?
Oh God, where do I begin? I would really like this, the Bifaco. It's like a mixer. I can't remember what it is, but there's like two different modules. One is like a send and return, I think. It would be great for me to have a mixer in my rack, but it would be very stress. I don't know how it would fit actually now. Now I'm like second guessing. I really wanted that module at one point, but I think it's kind of big and maybe it wouldn't fit. But I would like to have the mixer in the eurorack, because when this is for live, for when I'm setting up, it's a very stressful thing actually. There's a lot going on. The mixers, and God knows what place and God knows what condition or kind of mixer it is. So setting up is very stressful. It's not the performing to me is not as stressful as the setup. And so if I could have everything set up like Surgeon, when we work together, he has 2 outputs, and it's like the most amazing thing to me, and it's like my ultimate goal. Like, I want 2 inputs into the mixer, and I don't have to do anything. This to me is like mind-blowing. So that's my goal. So that would require a mixer, and that one is, I've heard from many sources, is the best. And I think there's even some kind of compressor running through it. I'm not really sure, but so it's like on back order anyway, I think, and I don't need, we're all poor right now, so I'm not trying to buy anything. Once the lockdown is done, maybe.
I think those are the questions for now.
Okay,
like,
great.
if you do have any more questions, feel free to put them in the comment section now. I don't know, do you want to do play a little bit of music?
Yeah, why not?
And for the people
do
to have a thought of what they want to ask you.
Yes, perfect.
Cool.
Oh, look, the very, I was like, all right, what have I done? Oh. Well, I do have this idea to just do a set that's only a kick drum. We also discussed this earlier. See, how long would it take people to get frustrated? I think it would take a long time. So maybe that's what, see how long it takes. Maybe we'll do that now. And then just the hi-hat. Oh, the shaker. definitely not desirable. And then if you just isolate it and make it really loud. Reverb. Maybe I have to. Ah! I'm gonna put too much reverb, I think. So does any more questions?
Yes, there are actually a few
Okay,
more
good.
questions.
Sort that out.
There was another question. First of all, thanks for the jam. That's really great.
Thank you, thank you.
There was a question on your studio approach again. Is there like do you have a general approach on how you start in the studio? Is there like some machines that you tend to start your jams with, or is it always different?
It depends. There'll be blocks of what I tend to do is I have like one period where I focus on, you know, one setup, and I do it to death, to death, to death until I can't do anything else with it, and then I move on to another one. So it will change, but it will change only in blocks of time. So at the moment, you know, I think with techno you usually do start with a kick drum. And at the moment, what I'm very excited about is making samples and the ability to resample from the rest of my modular with the feature of my new module by Erica Synths that I can finally resample into this. So at the moment I'm having a lot of fun and sourcing samples, you know, from different places, you know, that I shouldn't necessarily, you know, manipulating samples that I find from other places. So this is what I'm mostly excited about right now. That's what's keeping me going. But usually it will be one way of doing it for over a period of time, and then that will entirely change, except there's always the Tanzbier. And up to this point there's always been the machine drum, but it's getting neglected. Don't tell it. It's gonna be upset with me.
There's another question from Wesley asking, how are you clocking the modular from the machine drum, or is there like something else you're clocking it from?
It's comes from the machine drum to the this MIDI through MIDI Solutions Quadra through, which is amazing. I would never have two of them now. And then that goes into the MFB, another MFB module, MIDI CV MFB module. So it has a MIDI in, and then you know, CV. You can either sequence synth voices from it via the CV and gate, but all I actually use it for is the clock. So great module, very straightforward, perfect communication, especially with an MFB sequencer. So rock solid.
Another question just came in. Why machine drum instead of Octatrack?
Because I haven't wanted to invest in the Octatrack yet. There's no particular features that make the machine drum necessarily better. Well, not, but it's. I like the way it looks too. I like the silver machines. But yeah, the Octatrack, having the mono machine and the machine drum, I also felt an obligation to really ride them both through because they're such amazing machines, and in some ways they actually, the Octatrack is this weird hybrid between the two of them. If you've ever had the mono machine, it's like, you know, people complain about the Octatrack, like difficulty level of learning. Well, the mono machine is for sure not any better than that. So, you know, again, I like to squeeze everything out of a piece of equipment, but I think the Octatrack, eventually I'll get one. But I also have, at the moment, it's hard to learn something totally new. It's a tough thing because you need to learn something new in order to like make a different, to disrupt your process so you can come up with new ideas. But then there's also this thing of, oh my God, it's going to take so long, you know what I mean? That it will decrease your productivity for a certain amount of time. But ultimately, I know that that's worth it, you know, because then you'll double time be in production mode once you have a new thing that you figure out. So you just have to develop your time. You have to, you know, realize that there's going to be a period of inactivity followed by a period of extreme activity. But if you're keep using the same thing, you'll have kind of a period of average, you know, productivity. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point.
One last question, not related to music production, from Louisa. How can we get inquiries about interviews?
Oh, well, contact my Instagram or my booking agent. If you go to my Instagram, you can see the, if you go to my link tree, if you go to my link tree, you can totally find, you can, if you contact my booking agent, that should be the easiest way. Linktree, Instagram.
Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot to everyone tuning in. I hope you had a good time.
I had the best time. Thank you for watching, everyone.
And
I had a great time.
make sure to join the Tech Talk newsletter for upcoming streams and events. And just a few shout outs before we wrap the stream up. Thanks to Music Board for funding this event. Thanks to In Theory for streaming. Obviously, thanks to Paloma for giving us this great location. And yeah, of course, to you, Lady Starlight, for the great talk. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.